Cavendish is going to burst for the line. The Manx missile is back.
Look at this. This is the man they call the Manx missile, the fastest man in the world.
What a delivery by Mark Cavendish. This man is unstoppable. He came past the rest with unbelievable acceleration.
Mark Cavendish.
When he sees the finish, he is absolutely impossible to beat. Mark Cavendish gets his 13th victory in a Tour de France.
It's just an unbelievable finisher. The fastest sprinter on the planet.
Cavendish is delighted. He's going to go long.
Mark Cavendish has cemented himself as the greatest sprinter of all time, following his miraculous comeback last year. At the age of 36, he became Cycling Weekly's Rider of the Year, and in the eyes of many, he's become an icon of the sport. His resume lacks little and includes more than 150 professional wins. A third of those are Grand Tour stages. The Manx missile was born to sprint. A pure sprinter who is equipped with fast-twitch muscle fibers, allowing him to accelerate instantaneously with explosive power and reach top speeds of nearly 80 kilometers per hour. Growing up in the Isle of Man, Mark developed a passion for speed. But his speed is just one of the many keys to his success. Over 70% of a sprinter's work goes into fighting drag. That's where aerodynamics come into play. Professional teams spend so much time, effort and money studying their riders' positions on the bike, looking for ways to improve them. However, using an aero position in a sprint comes with a cost. For most riders, this is not a comfortable position for sprinting because it lowers the maximum power that can be generated. This explains why many sprinters prefer more comfortable, flexible, and less aerodynamic positions. Maintaining such a low profile while sprinting is hard, but for a short guy like Cavendish, it's his natural sprinting position. He makes no effort to maintain it.
Mark Cavendish being challenged by Robbie McEwen, but this is the new Robbie McEwen.
Pure sprinters, and there aren't many, and I think he took it to another level. I think one of the big things about that makes Cav so successful, his actual body shape and the way he's positioned on the bike makes him so incredibly aerodynamic. He's got pretty short legs and short little arms, and it just puts him into this aerodynamic position without having to sort of contort his body to try and get down and get aerodynamic, just by reaching down into the drops. Makes him look like a time trial helmet on a bike.
His small size allows him to get the most out of slipstreaming others, while they hardly get any drafting advantage out of riding on his wheel. Caleb Ewan adopted a similar posture and took it to the extreme. It proved to be very effective, giving him a 15% advantage in terms of speed compared to standard sprinting positions. Because these two riders are super aero and comfortable at the same time, they are able to compensate the gap in power against much more powerful peers.
He doesn't need to put out the same sort of power as someone like Greibel, for instance, who's, for the cycling people, is putting out something like 1800 watts, or a Kittle who's putting out 1900 watts. Cav can go the same speed by putting out 1350.
Even for the casual viewer, his sprinting style is noticeably different from the rest. It's not just his smooth and perfectly circular pedaling, but also the way his core stays centered. His head is barely moving, like a sprinting cheetah, limiting the amount of air disturbance around him and keeping air resistance at a low. But that doesn't mean his body is inflexible during the sprint. And while he's having a tight grip on the handlebars, his elbows are freely moving, swinging his bike left and right in what he calls bringing the bike to the feet in order to achieve maximum sprinting efficiency. On an ideal day, Cavendish would have a number of teammates do the work for him as the race approaches the finish. It's called a lead-out train. Their job is to keep the race under their control and carry Mark to the 200 meters to go marker. When the train is lined up, each rider is doing nearly 40% less effort than the rider in front of him. By sitting at the back, Cavendish can travel at the same speed as the rider at the front while barely pedaling. He doesn't necessarily need a team around him in order to get a win, but it makes his job a lot easier. Cavendish is a man who calculates every detail in his head. Like anyone who is obsessive-compulsive, he wants everything to be perfect. In an old interview, Mark said, "It's not just about my frontal area in a sprint, it's everything beforehand. How I ride in the peloton, my pedaling action, how I sit. I save so much energy for the finish." Mark does very minimal effort throughout the day. When there's a possible sprint at the end of the stage, he doesn't put 100% effort into the intermediate sprints, even if the two sprints are hours apart. At the end of the race, he knows exactly how deep he can go. And he's not only good at managing effort throughout the race, he also excels at managing his efforts throughout the final sprint as well. When he's fresh, he could pull off an 18-second sprint, while an exhausted Cavendish might prefer jumping on the wheels of other sprinters and launch the sprint a few seconds later. The length of the sprint depends on that, and also depends on the wind direction and steepness of the road. These variables make each and every sprint different. Going for long distances requires a wise distribution of effort, and as he once said, it's not about your absolute maximum wattage, it's about how long you can hold that high wattage for the whole sprint. Given the uniqueness of each finish, there is no set range from which you always open up the sprint. Knowing exactly when to attack is one of Cavendish's greatest weapons. It's impressive how he times his sprint to perfection. When the finish line is within sight, riders can easily misjudge distance as nervousness takes over. A common mistake is to go for a long way out, which could work in your opponent's favor. The most likely result is a defeat, unless it's tailwind.
Cavendish decides to light it. He's going to go long. Where's Ben Lancaster? Where's everybody else? And here comes Cavendish. His head down. He's running for the line. Viviani's going to have to battle and go from other places here. But is it going to be Mark Cavendish as he heads for the line? Oh, the red jersey makes him late.
In this sprint, Cannondale, the team in green, were counting on their lead-out train to deliver their man to the 200 meters point. But Cavendish decides to open up the sprint from 350 meters out, surprising everybody with a very early jump. When everybody started accelerating, he had already picked up momentum and was on a par with them in terms of position. Had he waited till the 200 meters marker to launch his sprint, winning would have been impossible. He was able to cover that distance in 15 seconds. That's a very long range, but thanks to the tailwinds and the surprise factor, he managed to pull it off. In some rare situations, Mark prefers not to sprint in the center of the road, specifically when he finds himself at the front of the pack with a long way to go after getting delivered by a lead-out. He launches the sprint from the center of the road, then goes sideways. With a closer look, you'll notice a number of riders sitting on his slipstream. Once he switches lanes, they follow, which creates an overcrowded area that causes a bunch of his opponents to get boxed in. They eventually miss out on the sprint. In other words, he just brings a random portion of riders that may threaten his chances of winning to a halt. However, he has received a ton of criticism in the past for this aggressive style.
Is he going to get this one? Oh, it's a massive crash.
Switching lanes and improvising in mid-sprint are also some of the actions he tends to take when he's badly positioned, or when he realizes he might have gone too early. He is very good at picking wheels that have the best potential. He looks left and right, searching for sweet spots, for riders to use as shelter from the wind. When he spots one, he goes for it, sits on the slipstream to take a breath, and relaunches the sprint shortly afterwards.
Viviani being dropped a little bit too far back, 300 metres to go. 300 metres to go now. It looks like Alexander Kristoff on the left hand of the centre of your screen, sat in the saddle, powering along. He opens up his sprint now. Mark Cavendish is on the wheel of Alexander Kristoff. Viviani on the left hand side. Kristoff goes, Cavendish in the middle. Cavendish in the middle. Cavendish takes it. What a victory for the Manxman. Wow, what a sprint that was.
It's now or never time, and the bells have rung, and this is the time you've got to go, or just pack up and go home. And then Gibby gets on the back of him and just tries to stay with it. Cam gets himself into position. Hausler's there. Oh my life!
A millimetre could decide a 300-kilometre race. Such cases are not uncommon in professional cycling. The bike throw may not be Cavendish's most powerful weapon, but it is there whenever he needs it, and it's something that every cyclist should master. It's a technique that allows the rider to have an edge over his opponents at the finish line. If executed perfectly, over 30 centimetres or the equivalent of 1 foot could be gained. You can perform a bike throw by stretching the back out, extending the arms and legs forward, and thrusting the bike across the line with force to move the bike as far forward as possible.
Can you talk about his mentality, perhaps how he differs to other riders? He is a particular type of character.
When he focuses on something, it's almost scary.
I always want to be the best. I still want to be the best. I still believe I'm the best. I've never looked back on what I've done, even before I was cycling. You know, when I achieved something, I set a goal, I wanted to achieve it. The day after I achieved it, I set a new goal, you know. That's always how it was, and it's how it continued to be, you know.
Self-confidence is commonly defined as the sureness of feeling that you are equal to the task at hand. This sureness is characterized by absolute belief in ability. In the case of Mark Cavendish, his confidence is reflected in everything he says and does. It is reflected in his ability to bounce back from failures, and it can be seen in his charisma and aggressive style on the bike.
Here comes Mark Cavendish, the Manx Express in the World Champs jersey.
Sprinters have to be an extroverting character because of the explosive nature of the side of the sport that they practice. They have to appear brash, they have to appear outgoing, but they have to be confident. They're like boxers. You know, you don't get into the ring and say, yeah, well, I'm going to do my best today, I'll see what You've got to get in there and say, I'm going to win. I want to kill this guy. I want to knock him to the ground, and that's what a sprinter has to do. A sprinter has to have that character. Otherwise, he's going to finish second, he's going to finish third. And sometimes that comes out as being cocky and cheeky and brash, but actually deep down, Mark Cavendish he's a pretty cool character.
He goes in the centre. Cavendish has come out from behind everybody else on the left-hand side, but he's out of it. Oh, he's gone down! Mark Cavendish has gone down! Oh, massive crash! Huge crash!
His career is full of ups and downs. We couldn't count how many times he crashed, or how many bones he's broken throughout the years. His mental strength and immunity against fear is exceptional, and he's never hesitant to go back to the danger zone and do it again. Cavendish's downfall began in 2017 after he was diagnosed with the Epstein-Barr virus. It prevented him from performing at the highest levels for over 2 years. In that period, he went through numerous bad experiences.
Not again. I think it's Cavendish.
Nothing seemed to be going his way. His inability to compete consistently was starting to take its toll on his mental health, something that led many cyclists before him to retire. It was downright depressing for one who once was cycling's undisputed sprint king.
Mark Cavendish, I can see it, and it was a really hard day for you. I see you're getting emotional. How was your day?
That's perhaps the last race of my career now. It's up a little bit.
Do you really think this is your last race?
Maybe, yeah.
Did you want to show something?
But there's one thing that sets successful people like Cavendish apart from the rest. He is not a quitter.